Greetings, fellow humans. My name is Alistair Lord and I am the Renaissance Yorkshireman. Today I'm currently on location. I'm staying at the Land of Joy Tibetan Buddhist Retreat Centre near Hexham, which is not far from the English-Scottish border, and I'm doing some voluntary work here. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about the feminine path of healing, which is about unconditional love. And I touched on this in my last video, and in this video I'm going to flesh out some of the ideas in that. So firstly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the language around self-love. Secondly, I'm going to talk about this positive mental health aspect of self-love, which is a kind of middle path between low self-esteem and narcissism. Third, I'm going to talk about some ideas around self-care. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about loving kindness meditations, which is a form of creative visualization. And in the Buddhist tradition, these are known as metta meditations. Metta spelled M-E-T-T-A. So first, I want to talk a little bit about how English touches on the language of self-love. So often you might hear the phrase, Jane really loves herself, or John really loves himself. And in English, these have very negative connotations. They're often associated with narcissism. But actually, to have a healthy sense of self-love is an incredibly positive thing. So in the first instance with English, there's this kind of problematic element about this phrase of so-and-so loves themselves. Now, in the second instance, we only really have one word for love in English, love. But I think we all understand that the love that a parent feels for a child is very different from the love that the child feels for the parent. And again, it's very different from the love that two lovers feel towards each other. Now, in other languages, in fact, there are different words for love. So the word that the kind of love that a parent feels for the child would be a completely different word from the love that two lovers feel together. So there is only one word in English for this, but we need to understand that actually, in fact, there are different types of love. So let's expand upon this point about self-love and narcissism. So healthy self-love absolutely is not narcissistic. And many people have a serious problem with loving themselves. Many people, in fact, hate themselves. And you know, this is a really big problem. So why does this happen? Well, there's many reasons. So often it stems from childhood. They may have had one or both parents were abusive. They might have gone to a school where the teachers were aggressive, angry, potentially violent, or they might have grown up in care homes with abusive carers. There's all sorts of reasons why somebody might not feel love towards themselves and in fact feel hate or dislike towards themselves. And often people start running a kind of tape loop of you're really clumsy, you're really stupid, you're really bad at doing this, no one will ever love you. And these are really negative things, and to develop a healthy sense of self-love, people who have those issues need to overcome them. 2 or 3 years ago, I read a book about narcissism, and it turns out, in fact, there is a narcissism scale, which goes from 1 to 10. The psychopath scale goes from 0 to 40, so it's slightly different from the narcissism scale. Now, it turns out you can do a self-test of narcissism, and the mentally most healthy people score in the middle. So people who score 4, 5 or 6 out of 10 on the narcissism scale actually show the highest levels of mental health and the highest levels of resilience. So people who score really low, so 1, 2 or 3 out of 10, this is associated with low self-esteem. And people who score very high, 7, 8, 9 out of 10, this is associated with arrogance and narcissism. So really, if we think of this in terms of narcissism scale, we're trying to strike a balance between low self-esteem and arrogance. So a healthy sense of self and love towards the self that doesn't shade into arrogance and narcissism. I mean, it may do on occasion because, you know, we are all only human, but this middle ground of between these two extremes is where we're aiming for. So the first part of aiming for this is self-care. And none of the ideas that I'm about to tell you are rocket science. They're really not. So in the first instance with self-care, eat well and exercise. You know, don't live off junk food. Eat healthy food, organic if you can. Have a balanced diet. Find a form of exercise which you find easy to do and stick with that. If you're into swimming and not running, don't force yourself to run. If you're into running but not swimming, don't force yourself to swim. I mean, you know, pick something that you like and which you find easy to do. Because if you pick something difficult, well, there's all sorts of problems in life without making them for yourself. So create some sort of routine which is easy to follow and which you like doing. If you like drinking alcohol, smoking cannabis, or taking any other sort of drug, moderate your use. Or if it's problematic, perhaps it's best to completely abstain. I mean, these are very personal issues. But I mean, if you're like a lot of British people and you're drinking 6 or 7 days a week and you're often drinking to excess, then this is a sign that you don't have a healthy sense of self-love. Don't put yourself down. Don't be telling yourself things like, I'm really stupid, I'm really clumsy, I'm really forgetful, I'm thick, no one will love me. You know, when you find yourself having this conversation in your head where you're putting yourself down, stop yourself and substitute something more positive. You know, I am worthy of love. I am intelligent. I have accomplished things. And finally, celebrate your successes. You know, we all do things in life that are positive and that work out. We set ourselves challenges. Sometimes we fall short, but often we'll reach these things. Celebrate these victories. You know, there are lots of people who say things like, well, yeah, I did that, but anyone could do that. But I mean, not anyone can, you know. I learned to speak Spanish. I mean, anyone could go and learn to speak Spanish, but not everyone does that. So, you know, when I, at the age of 23, became fluent in Spanish, it was a revelation to me. And, you know, I still celebrate that victory on occasion today. You know, I was in Spain a few weeks ago and just being able to have normal conversations with people, you know, it can be quite rewarding. But the point is, you need to recognize when you've had successes, recognize when you've had victories and celebrate them. You know, don't be putting yourself down all the time. And finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about loving kindness meditations. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, these are known as metta meditations. So this word metta, M-E-T-T-A, as it's normally transliterated into English from Pali, the language of Buddhism, is not to be confused with Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse, which is M-E-T-A, single T, not a double T. So with creative visualization meditations, there's 3 main ways that we can do this. I mean, actually there are more, but for the purpose of simplicity, there's 3 main ways. One is a narrative. So you're telling yourself some kind of story, or you're repeating some kind of mantra or affirmation to yourself in your head. The second way we can do this is through a visualization, where you're seeing something in your mind's eye. And the third way we can do this is with feeling. And sometimes you might only be using one of these techniques, sometimes you might be using two, sometimes you might be using all three. It partly depends on the technique itself, but it partly depends on what you are naturally predisposed to. Some people find it very difficult to visualize something with their mind's eye, but they find it easy to tell themselves a story. Some people are the other way round. They're much more visual than wordy. So the important thing to do is find a technique, experiment with different ways of doing it. Once you kind of have decided upon what works for you and what you're happy with, then continue with that. So let's first talk about the narrative aspect. So I use a little affirmation, which is a Buddhist affirmation, which is short and simple, which is why I like it. So it's a 4-line verse and I normally repeat it 3 times. So it begins like this. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. So 4 lines. With the first line and the third line, I'm doing a breath in. With the second and the fourth line, I'm doing breath out. So may I be filled with loving kindness, breath in. May I be well, breath out. May I be peaceful and at ease, breath in. May I be happy, breath out. Nice and simple. There are more complex versions available and there are longer versions available. You know, if you like a longer version, fine, you can find them on the internet. But I like this one because it's short and it's simple and it communicates a very positive message in the present simple tense. Some people, particularly in the Buddhist tradition, like to use some kind of mantra. So this might be in the Tibetan language or in Sanskrit or in Pali. But those things are not necessary, particularly if you're not a Buddhist. You know, I like the English one because it's nice and simple. So the second way you can do a creative visualization is with the visual aspect. And there's really 2 main ways that you can do this. You can do it as if you're seeing a scene through your eyes, or you can do it as if you're watching a scene like in a movie, and in which case you can be an active participant in the scene. So you might be replaying something, some situation that happened to you that was very positive. So it could be an interaction with a parent, it could be an interaction with your child, could be an interaction with your lover, and you're kind of drawing on your memory and generating this picture in the present moment, drawing on your memory. Or it could be something like you're visualizing your heart and you're visualizing your heart expanding, or you're visualizing light and love energy coming into your heart, or you're visualizing yourself generating love in your heart and shooting that out to other people. There's lots of different ways you could do this. Some of them, particularly in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, are very complex and elaborate. But to begin with, start with things that are simple and build up. If you end up sticking with these kind of meditations, you can build them up over time. And the final way that we can do a creative visualization meditation with loving kindness is through the feeling. And again, you may well be drawing on your memory for this, but you're generating the feeling in the present moment. So you're often generating this feeling in your heart, and you might be projecting love to yourself, you might be projecting it to other people. Now, if you've ever taken MDMA, street drug name ecstasy, E, Molly, Mandy, X, whatever, or LSD, you may well have felt these feelings of extreme love before. Or if you're a parent, you might have experienced this, shortly after the birth of your first child when you were bonding and there's this strong sense of love. You can draw on these memories to help you generate this feeling, but the feeling that you're generating is in the moment. So it's a form of mindfulness meditation in some respects, because mindfulness is about being in the present moment. And although we're drawing on a past memory, we're generating the feeling in the present moment. So at the moment, that's all I've got to say about loving kindness meditations. If you have any questions about anything today, please put them in the comments box. If you could like and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. I also have a book for sale on Amazon, Post-Capitalism, An Alternative to the Great Reset. I'll put a link in the description box. And also I have a course about making sustained personal change in your life. And this draws on my own experience of journaling and creative visualizations. If you're interested in any information, you can check out my website, leave your email address and your name. Thank you for giving me your time today. Peace.